Back in my frat days, I was one of the guys helping with the hazing. It wasn't a glamorous job, but it was nowhere near the kind of horror you see in the college movies. It wasn't just about humiliation. It was about getting to know people and dedicating yourself. They say that the best way to befriend someone is to ask them to do something for you. That way they are invested in you. It's harder to justify disliking someone or something if you've done them a favor. That's why we ask so much of our new pledges: time, sweat, and dedication. More often than not, we get it. It might be community outreach, small jobs, charity events, fundraising, all kinds of stuff. Like the year before me, where 4 of the pledges had a background in IT, while we effectively set up a campus computer support hotline. Crazy days. In my final college year, we had a more intense hazing than usual. The guy who was in charge had seen a few too many college flicks and went a bit overboard. To make up for it, we decided we were just going to do something fun and stupid for the final night of Hell Week. Rick, the guy who handled our finances, came up with the idea of a softball game. Then some asshole added to that, "What about a softball drinking game?" So that's how it started. We were going to play a game where everyone had a drink in their hand. You couldn't touch the ball or bases unless your cup was empty, and we'd have a refill station right by the batter and another further out in the field. It was going to be a complete shit show, but a funny one. Something to let a little steam off. Previous years, we had a guy who could make his own alcohol. Cheap stuff, a moonshiner named Elton, lived not too far out of town, and made stuff from some kind of bark. Real prepper kind of guy. That year, Elton was having trouble with the law, not too surprising. So we had to try to find another guy. Rick had the brilliant idea to check Craigslist. We ended up with a guy out in suburbia, this strange loner kind of guy who made his own hooch in his backyard. We talked to him a couple of times and decided to go see him in person. There was no point tiptoeing around it. The guy was a weirdo, but we were asking for something weird, so it kind of worked itself out. The guy was named Ramses. That tells you half the story right there. Lived in this huge 2-story house all by his lonesome. Not even a cat. He looked like pretty much anyone. Tall, lanky guy with slick, horn-rimmed glasses. Had a quiet voice, but a sturdy handshake. Shook our hands and immediately showed us his garage. He had half his garage full of just boxes. This guy was taking and making deliveries on the daily, it seemed. He had a workbench with a bottling kit, a scale, and a label maker. I couldn't see what he was putting labels on, though. He talked to us like we were on a tour as we made our way over the mounds of empty boxes.
Been working on this stuff, on and off for years,
he said.
Got 3 fresh batches rolling out on Monday.
Can you get it by Saturday?
Asked Rick.
It's kind of last minute, but we got a game. Saturday?
Ramses turned toward us, stroking his beardless chin. After a few seconds, he nodded.
If I heat it a bit, maybe. Could work. But that's gonna cost you extra.
Not too fast.
I smiled.
We're trying it first.
Ramses looked at us. We had a solid 6 seconds of quiet before he nodded and reached for a couple glasses. The liquid had a strange smell to it. It was like a very mild fungal whiff mixed with old water and salt. Upon closer inspection, there was a clear mix of bark, possibly pine. It had a mild discoloration, red almost, and a sort of heft to it. Texture. Ramses explained as he poured.
Mostly sunflower seeds, maple, and a bit of blueberry. Oily but, rich.
I declined as the designated driver. Before Rick had a chance to down it, Ramses added a little drink mix. Coconut, I think. Rick chugged it, wincing a bit at the taste. He looked up at me with a deep cringe.
No fucking coconut!
He spat.
Holy shit, that's vile.
I like it,
shrugged Ramses. Rick kept nodding at him over and over.
Yeah. This'll do. This'll fucking do.
We ordered 3 kegs for the softball game and went on our merry way. I didn't think twice about it. I wasn't the one holding the money. Ramses told us it'd be tricky and that he'd need as much time as possible, so he promised to drive up there with it himself. All we had to do was bring whatever drink mixes we wanted and enough ice to freeze a gaggle of penguins. We were all getting excited for it, especially the pledges. We had sort of a new guard, old guard kind of matchup, and it was going to be nice to just let off some steam. For the rest of the week, everything boiled down to shit-talking the other team in good fun, printing custom jerseys, and making chants. People were going crazy for it, and I wasn't about to stop them. Once Saturday rolled around, we made our way out to a secluded spot, an abandoned schoolyard just out of town. Most of us got there after lunch classes ended. We took our time setting up tables, snacks, and drinks. And of course, a beer pong table for those who couldn't play for one reason or another. Bluetooth speakers rocked, shook me all night long, hours before the first pledges arrived. We were starting to worry that Ramses had just taken the money and ran. It wasn't much cash, but the guy had some definite scumbag vibes to him. But at about 2 in the afternoon, he rolled up with his semi and dropped it all off. He was gone long before I even got the chance to thank him. We filled up the coolers as best we could with various mixes in what we dubbed Ramses' Red Shine by now, thanks to the strange coloration. It was forbidden to start drinking until the first ball had been thrown, though, as to not pre-party ourselves into an early forfeit. One by one, the pledges dropped in. The new guard had dressed up in various shades of red, while us seniors were all blue. To round it all off, we had judges dressed in white stripes. We hadn't really planned on it being a patriotic theme, but god damn it, we were gonna lean into it. I was so hyped for it, until it was time to draw straws for designated driver. You can guess who pulled the short one. I was put in charge of music and, if need be, driving. In return, I got a free pass to drink at the next event. It just kinda sucked that I'd be the only sober person at the last outing of the hazing. I was kinda bummed about it, but it was nice seeing everyone so relaxed. Good vibes all around. The game was on. First cup of the game was chugged by Brandon. Didn't quite make it all the way, but made a decent first run. The outfielders were eager to get drunk and were already sipping their drinks in between batters. Slogans and cheers were being thrown back and forth, and I could see a few in the back row already getting into the groove. And that should have been it. That should have been the whole night. Nothing else was supposed to happen, just bros being bros. But something did happen. What happened next is why the frat isn't allowed to drink anymore. Why people get quiet when they talk about what is now an 8-year-old party legend. Why some people fell off the map and why others are only talked about in hushed tones. But it wasn't obvious from the start. I sat by the sidelines all day long. To me, it all just looked like drunk guys doing drunk things. Someone slipping, some people hugging a little too hard. It didn't seem all that irregular until one of the guys in the back row stepped out of line, drunk off his ass. I don't think he even had that much, maybe like 2 cups. This guy, Steven, was not a lightweight. Got in on a football scholarship. So Steven steps up to me and pulls out his car keys. I figured he wanted me to make sure he didn't drive. But no, instead he put the keys between his fingers, like some kind of improvised claw, and stared at me. His eyes were pulsing, like I could see the blood push through them. Breathing. He leaned in, inches from my face, eyes so big I could see myself in them.
I was an eagle.
He whispered.
In the other world, I was a fucking eagle.
He let out this shrill, animalistic screech and just started slashing at me. He was nowhere near close, but I fell out of my chair trying to get away. When he realized he'd missed, he just started stabbing into the nearby table, over and over, bloodying his hands, screeching like a fucking maniac. I backed off, expecting someone to pull him away, but no one did. Instead, my attention turned to whatever was happening out on the field. Fucking pandemonium. One of the guys had fallen to his knees next to second base, screaming at the top of his lungs, "I'll never forgive them! I'll never forgive them!" As he clutched the base plate, 2 guys started fistfighting, one of them claiming he did a mother of 3, and another crying about how he would be 6 generations of leeches. One of the judges tore off his jersey, shrieking to the sky, "I was born of machines! A world without sun!" It devolved so fast, their pulsing eyes and convulsing movement turning them from partygoers into whatever, all in a few minutes. Screaming out nonsense, contorting their bodies like they were remembering something they weren't. As I turned to run, I spotted something in the cooler. Little white insects making their way along the edge of the ice cubes, slowly spinning counterclockwise in unison. To this day, what strikes me the most is just how damn fast it all happened. Everyone had been drinking on and off for quite some time at different paces and speeds, but it all hit them at the same time anyway, like a resonance. I thought that maybe someone had spiked it, some kind of drug. I'd seen people tweak out before, but this was just off the scale. I backed away, reaching for my phone. They were all too deep into their own worlds to notice me, even Steven and his impromptu eagle claws. I took a few steps down the path towards the parked cars, only to realize that they were all lowering their voices. Turning around, I recoiled from Rick, standing just a few feet ahead. He pointed at me with an arm he could barely keep up, his mouth agape like a fish out of water, his eyes blinking at different speeds, looking in different directions. Even from there, I could see his tongue was dry, a redness around his eyes, telling me he wasn't blinking. He just made this noise like a human siren, a long, monotone scream, like one long E, then nothing. I just stood there looking at him. I could feel their reaction before I heard it, how every pair of eyes turned to me and how they joined Rick in his outcry. This long, reverberating note digging into my skull, it made my stomach churn like something was bubbling inside me. I tried to keep walking, but my balance was so offbeat that I kept tripping on my own feet. It felt like my head was on a swivel. By some miracle, I made it back to my car. I fumbled the keys, scratching a deep cut into the paint, but I got the door open. The moment it clicked open, I saw movement. They were coming. I slammed the door shut, feeling my insides relax as the sound was blocked out. I could see the windshield vibrate. I pulled out my phone just as two pledges flung themselves into my car. One of them completely smashed the windshield, while the other just flopped to the side, pulling down a side mirror. I felt my heart jump out of my chest as my fingers went cold. I put the car in reverse and prayed. It went faster than I expected. I could barely control my feet, so I just floored the gas, sending me practically flying down the dirt road. Just seconds later, I was flung forward, smacking my head into an airbag. I'd hit a tree. It is all sort of a blur after that. I stumbled out just as I saw these vague shapes coming down the road. I rolled onto the ground, landing flat on my back, knocking the air out of me. Looking up at the sky, I could hear them coming. Uneven steps and mishaps all along the way. They didn't care. It was complete, reckless abandon. At a glance, it might have been funny, stumbling over one another, over their own legs, bumping into each other, all making that awful noise, their faces slack, stupid, and ugly. Eyes reverberating with the pulse of that awful tone. With the car still running, I crawled underneath it. I saw their legs come into vision as they gathered in a circle, their screams slowly lowering back into their conversational madness. No one bent down to check under the car. I just saw dozens of legs anxiously stomping back and forth. Then one of them smacked his fist against the hood. That set the others off.
A spike!
One cried as he smacked his head into the driver's side window.
A spike in my fucking head!
Ever, forever, ever dark, bawled another as he started to tear out the passenger side seat. As a pack, they took out their inane frustrations on the car, tearing out electronics, breaking plastic panels, ripping into every soft surface with their bare hands and teeth. I saw one of them come away with the steering wheel, then he bit down so hard that 3 teeth dropped out of his head. They completely smashed it. They tore into the motor while it was still running, making the machine cry out in a metallic pain before it died. I reached into my pocket to send a text for help, only to realize I'd lost my phone when I dropped to the ground. It was a few feet to my right, among the sea of legs. There was nothing I could do but to hold my ears shut, close my eyes, and stay as still as possible. Breathing in the dirt, still smelling that strange drink on their collective breaths, growing stronger. I don't know how long I stayed there. At some point, I saw one of them stumble backwards, clawing at his own open eyes, crying like a child. Had it not been for his swollen, bleeding eyelids, he'd have looked right at me. The sky darkened as their voices grew hoarse and weak. Hours later, they were still tearing into the car, littering the ground with everything from electronics and debris to their own blood, sweat, and hair. And still they mumbled, they wheezed, they cried, Then at some point, it just sort of stopped. It was like they'd fallen asleep, right then and there, standing in this mob circle around the car. The sun had sunk well below the horizon, casting long shadows. I waited a couple of minutes, held my breath, and went for it. My arm was stiff and my fingers weak. I'd felt an oncoming cramp on and off 4 hours, and suddenly moving didn't help. My pulse spiked as I reached for the phone, feeling the cool evening breeze on my naked hand. I grabbed the phone, retracted my hand, and almost gave myself away. They'd been stepping on my phone over and over all day long. The touchscreen was dead. My instinct was to scream, but instead I bit down on my lip hard enough to break the skin. Every nerve in my body tightened. What else could I do? Could I just walk off? Were they really sleeping? I couldn't risk it. I'd be in the middle of them, waiting to be torn apart. If they could do this kind of damage to a damn car, a person would be short work. I just lay there, counting seconds, making impossible plans in my head, feeling the car growing smaller. Every tiny movement I made felt like a surrender. I pondered just poking one of them, to get it over with, these intrusive thoughts taking over my rational ones. And yet, I did nothing. I remember blinking in and out of a painful half-sleep. I remember how they just stood there, legs like a forest of jeans, shorts, and tracksuit pants. With every breath they took, I could imagine hearing a voice speaking through them. An inhale, an exhale. E-O, E-O, E-O. Like a fucking lullaby from hell. As the temperatures dropped, I felt the shivers coming on. But as it seemed, so did my assailants. They were shivering something fierce. So bad, in fact, that some had to lean against the car or sit down. One by one, they dropped, bloody, battered, and raw. Some just sat down, others collapsed. Another intrusive thought wormed into my head. This one's stronger than the others. Potent, desperate. Run! So I did, and I crawled out, my nerves aching from the sudden movement. I felt stray hands reaching for me, grasping at my pants, my jacket. Something grabbed a handful of hairs from my neck. But somehow, amongst this emerging sea of hands, I got through. Like passing your hand through a flame, it only hurts when you stop. I got out. Somehow I got out. I saw them all turn towards me, one by one, their eyes unfocused and worn. Some had passed out, others were about to. I realized, maybe too late, that these people were already defeated. They were sick. I reached for the closest one, an unconscious Rick, and dug out the phone from his pocket. As expected, he didn't have a screen lock. I kept looking back down at him as I dialed for help. The moment the call went through, his eyes rolled back in his skull. But I swear his mouth moved. A silent thank you. That whole night turned into a scary story around campus. Some don't even think it happened, but the Redshin night was definitely a thing. There are many reasons for people not to believe us, though. For example, toxicology came back negative. Just alcohol, and not even that much of it. Ramses was quick to leave town as he realized his fuck-up, leaving behind most of his distillery and empty boxes. Still, there was little to explain our physical reaction. It was just blueberries, maple, and the blue seeds of sunflower. I think somehow it was a mistake. He rushed the batch and something went wrong. That drink mix he poured with the first drink he shared with Rick? I think it was a neutralizing agent, just in case it wasn't ready. 4 of the guys went blind. One of them got permanent nerve damage in his neck. One of them broke his finger so bad they had to amputate. And that's just the physical pain. I can't even begin to imagine how many hours of therapy this caused. People were scarred and ruined for the rest of their lives, beating themselves into bloody submission. It got too painful being reminded of that night, so most of us have lost contact. Sometimes I read these articles, party gone wrong, young adults making idiots of themselves. Partygoers erupt into violence. And yeah, most of the time it's just a bad time. But I wonder, is it always like that? Or did someone just drink something they shouldn't? Hell if I know. One would have thought I'd be used to this by now, typing with one arm. It takes time to get used to, especially when you spent most of your life in front of a keyboard. Muscle memory digs deep. A few years ago, I was in a car accident. I was going 60 down an empty road, coming home from a long day of overtime when some kind of animal came charging out of the woods. Trying to avoid a collision, I swerved off the road. My front left wheel got caught in a ditch, sending the entire vehicle careening off the road, only to smash into the trunk of an ill-placed black walnut tree, driver's side first. I have this vague memory of blinking lights and vague shapes in the distance. I was so cold, but at the same time it was so unreal. I couldn't even understand what had happened. I was brought into emergency surgery. My left arm was literally hanging by the thread of my jacket. It had come off clean by the socket. According to the surgeons, I was lucky. Most of my shoulder was intact, so it became a matter of salvaging what they could. The cut had been clean. I did suffer some whiplash damage to my neck and lower back, but considering I could have easily died or gotten paralyzed, losing an arm was considered mild. Looking back at it, I am inclined to agree. Considering what could have gone down, I was damn lucky. Still, in that luck, I wished I could have gotten just a tiny bit luckier. See, I had this gold ring that I'd been given by my later mother. A simple thing with the engraving of a musical note on the inside, a memento of our shared love of music. We played Louis Armstrong at her funeral. That ring disappeared in the accident. Somehow that's what bothered me the most. My arm could be reattached, it could heal, but that little memento was just gone. What followed was a long period of intense physical therapy, medication, and painful readjustments. It took weeks before I could even move my fingers again, and when I did, it felt like pushing your nerves through an unwashed garlic press. It was this stunning chemical level kind of pain, the kind where your body just shuts down, begging you to stop. But over time, I started to get over it. Small movements started to get better. I could tie my shoes, press the space bar, hold a knife. I wasn't about to juggle anytime soon, or play the piano, but I could get by. Soon enough, I got back to work. People were glad to see me. I wasn't going to be able to work at full capacity in my usual role, but I could still sit in on meetings. I won't bore you with the details, but most of my work relies on answering emails, proofreading, and translation. It's pretty technical stuff that requires a lot of pitter-patter on keyboards. At one point, I was stuck in a particularly drawn-out meeting between two clients that we were facilitating. I was there mostly as an observer to fill the seats, but I was supposed to weigh in if something related to my department came up. Of course, it didn't, but I still had to act interested. My colleague was trying to draw up a compromise between the two parties, laying out terms and conditions. Meanwhile, I was nursing a cup of coffee and waiting for the day to be over. Looking over to my side, I noticed something odd. I wasn't just holding the coffee cup with my left hand, I was stroking it with my index finger. Sort of like how you'd scratch a wary cat under its chin. It was a strange sensation. I was looking at my own arm, my own hand, and I couldn't feel what was happening. I couldn't feel the ceramics tapping against my finger, or the twitch of the nerve as it contracted and extended. It was just happening. An involuntary twitch, perhaps, but it didn't feel like it. It felt intended somehow. A few similar events took place that day. Grabbing the bathroom door for a little too long, knocking over desktop decorations, suddenly letting go of my jacket as I was about to head home. It was just little things. I was still having trouble even using my arm in the first place, so these quirks didn't bother me too much. A friend of mine was giving me a ride home. I wasn't at 100% yet, and sitting behind the steering wheel felt like inviting disaster. Instead, I sat in the passenger seat, nodding off as the trees passed me by with a steady rhythm, causing me to blink. A noise pulled me back. The driver said something, but I wasn't paying attention. Turning to him, I excused myself. "Sorry, what was that?" I asked. "What are you doing?" the driver repeated. I looked over. My left hand was wrapped around the parking brake, as if ready to pull. I forced myself to let go. "Nothing," I said. "Sorry, it's nothing." "Right," he nodded. "Just don't do that." "Yeah," I agreed. "Yeah, no, sorry." That night I was exhausted. It felt like my lungs had been robbed of breath. I felt weak and trembling. I was cold, yet feverish. Famished, but without an appetite. I went to bed early, face planting into the pillow. I had horrible nightmares, none of which I can remember. I kept waking up over and over, not being able to discern dream from reality. My bed was soaked with cold sweat, sending shiver after shiver up my spine. By the early hours of the morning, a stray ray of sunshine burned my eyes open. I was lying on my side, looking towards the window, leaning on my left shoulder. The fingers of my left hand were moving on their own, and not just moving, but bent in every which way, as if lacking bones. They were vibrating, shuddering, like wounded worms fearing a predator. I grabbed my hand and my fingers were back to normal. I could move them as usual. For a moment, I was doubting what I'd seen. It was one thing to experience oddities, but that was unreal. I must have laid there for half an hour, just expanding and contracting my hand, begging my body to work with me. Enough of this, I begged. Please. Enough. Please. I clapped my hands, cracked my fingers, and ran them through my hair. It was fine. Nothing out of the ordinary. Right? A couple of weeks passed without any serious peculiarities. I could even work a little. There were a few of oddities, like unknowingly grasping a warm cup or my fingers pointing in all directions when in contact with cold water. Just strange little things that I could easily get control of. That was until one morning at work. We were out of coffee, so I was making myself a cup of tea instead. As the water came to a boiling point, I accidentally spilled some on my arm. The reaction was immediate. My arm whipped out to the side, throwing the pot across the room. For a moment, my arm looked like it didn't have any bones, rippling like a skin-covered liquid. It made me think of it not as a part of me, but as an alien thing attached to my shoulder. And for a brief moment, in the blink of a heartbeat, I could see my fingers grow and shrink, fingernails throbbing like a cat throwing up a hairball. Suddenly, it stopped. Looking back, I could see one of my coworkers watching me from the other side of the room. She must have heard the crash. "You all right?" she asked. "Yeah, just got a burn," I sighed. I'll be fine." She side-eyed the broken pot on the other side of the room and nodded, not entirely convinced. As soon as she left, I looked down on my hand as if shying away from a wild animal. It was alien to me. It was something other. A twitch was one thing, but this was downright unnatural. Coming home that night, I had a weekend ahead of me. I ran my symptoms through a couple of online services. While there are a few ways the human body can trick itself, like the alien hand syndrome or phantom pains, this was different. Physical properties do not rapidly change. Then again, maybe I was imagining it. I decided to do something crazy, an experiment. I wanted to recreate what had happened in the break room. I boiled up some water and poured it into a cup. I held my left hand over my sink, grabbing the cup with my right. I stood there trying to calm myself. I wasn't insane. This was a rational thought that I had to play out in order to eliminate an outlandish possibility. I prepped a cold pack and ran the tap. Then, taking a deep breath, I poured some of the boiling water on my left hand. 12 fingers. My hand split into 12 fingers, lined with raw, open wounds. My wrist rolled like a cobra fixing its eyes on a prey animal. This was no longer an arm, it was a nest of flesh-colored snakes. My mind blanked. I fell backwards, smacking at my arm as if trying to kill it. I couldn't feel a thing. It's as if all sense of touch ended at my shoulder. I crawled backwards on the floor, trying to wave my arm away, but it clung to me like a parasite fixed on my shoulder. Seconds later, a searing pain ran up my arm. Looking down on my hand, it looked as it always had. It was just a hand with a burn. I could barely feel it through the pounding in my chest. Every noise in the room was overshadowed by my pulse. I ran my hand under a tap and wrapped a cold pack around the wrist. It wasn't a bad burn, but it wasn't nothing. I did some research, looking up news from around the time my accident took place. There were a couple of reports, but nothing out of the ordinary. A domestic call, a brawl at a local restaurant, a couple of missing pets. There were a couple of other reports, but they were short and didn't lead anywhere. A mention of a couple disturbances, some idiot blasting music in a parking lot. But there was one more thing I noticed. In one of the reports covering my accident, there was a picture of the car. There was spatter of the blood on the hood, with something meaty stuck in the grill, as if I'd hit an animal. That caught my interest. I couldn't remember hitting anything, so what the hell was that about? The next day my arm was acting up even worse. It kept going cold, as if circulation was cutting in and out. Before heading out, I wrapped it up in bandages, partly because of the cold sensation and partly because I just didn't trust it. There was no way to tell what could happen or why. I managed to get a hold of the owner of the junkyard where my trashed car had been towed. I went over there early in the day, just before the fog cleared. Now, this was long after the car had been crushed and stored, but it was the only lead I had. An older woman greeted me at the gates, letting me in. We had a short chat about the accident as she showed me around, ending up at a stack of metal that could hardly be recognized as anything. The only thing to even hint at my car being in that pile was a thin slice of colored metal from one of the doors. I dug around there for about 20 minutes, all while being observed by this old woman. "Yeah, won't find much," she said. "If the police didn't get it, the insurance folks did." "Been a lot of people digging around?" "Not a lot, nah," she said, shaking her head. "But you ain't the first." And she was right. There wasn't a drop of blood or bone or anything. It was just scrap metal in a pile of even more scrap metal. I was wasting my time, but as I was about to leave, I noticed something. I hadn't thought about it, but I could see the old woman was wearing a ring. It looked like a wedding ring at first, but she was wearing it on the wrong finger. I pointed to it. "You found that?" "What about it?" she asked. "It's got a tune engraved on the inside, right? Like a music note?" There was no response. She just looked at me and sighed. Turns out I was right. She gave it back. She'd found it near the hood of the car the night they brought it in. Grabbing it was just a spur-of-the-moment thing, and since no one had come asking for it, she'd kept it. I was a bit annoyed, but mostly relieved that I got it back. But the question remained, how had that ended up at the hood of the car? "There was all kinds of gunk just kind of hanging there," she said. "Figured it was an animal. And you're sure that's where you found it?" "Sure as sure can be, yeah." I stood there for a moment, feeling an uncomfortable thought forming in the back of my head. There was no way for that ring to go from my broken arm on the driver's side to a pile of meat stuck in the grill of the car. But the proof of it had been in front of me all along. I had worn that ring for 12 years. There was a permanent indent on my finger. Looking down at my left hand, there was no such indent. This wasn't my arm. As soon as that thought settled in my mind, I could feel the arm twist and turn. Hadn't it been for the bandages, there's no way to tell what it would have done. It squirmed and pulled against me, thrashing like a dying fish on land. The old woman just looked at me. "You all right? Want me to call someone?" she asked. I don't know," I said. "I don't know." I had to get to the bottom of this. I hurried out of there as fast as I could. It was getting late in the afternoon when I got back home. Grabbing an old backpack and a couple of painkillers, I was about to head right back out. But a thought hit me. Maybe it wasn't as abstract as I thought. Maybe it wasn't just a feeling. Maybe something was really there. Looking down at my arm, I could feel it stirring, just within my control. Something sleeping, waiting to spring into action. With my right hand on the front door, I stopped and spoke out loud. "Whatever you want, just don't," I asked. "Don't." There was no response, no stirring. On a spur-of-the-moment whim, I packed one more thing into my backpack, just in case, a Hail Mary. Making my way to the scene of the accident, it was impossible to tell anything had ever happened there. I could barely even make out the place where I swerved, or where my wheel got caught in the ditch. I found the general area in the field where my car had spun out of control, and from there it was easy to find the tree I'd smashed into. It was still there. I spent hours going over it all, following the path the car had taken, starting from that tree and working my way back. There was nothing there, nothing new. It was all just gravel, weeds, and pavement. What had I expected? A signed confession? As the sun dipped behind the clouds, I could feel a cold wind coming on. I'd lost track of time. As I turned back, there was a sudden cramp in my arm. A shock of pain crept up my spine, spreading throughout my body like a spider's web. I could feel my left arm throbbing against the bandage wrap. Something was wrong. I was in the middle of the field. I could see for miles in every direction. Cars passing by in the distance. Wet grass staining my pants all the way up to my knees. And this one cold wind cutting straight through my clothes. I shivered, but my left arm didn't. Taking a step back towards where I came from, another shot of pain struck me. This one tripped me, sending me face first into the grass. I dug around there for about 20 minutes, all while being observed by this old woman. "Yeah, I won't find much," she said. "If the police didn't get it, the insurance folks did." "Been a lot of people digging around?" "Not a lot, nah," she said, shaking her head. "But you ain't the first." And she was right. There wasn't a drop of blood or bone or anything. It was just scrap metal in a pile of even more scrap metal. I was wasting my time. But as I was about to leave, I noticed something. I hadn't thought about it, but I could see the old woman was wearing a ring. It looked like a wedding ring at first, but she was wearing it on the wrong finger. I pointed to it. "You found that?" "What about it?" she asked. "It's got a tune engraved on the inside, right? Like a music note?" There was no response. She just looked at me and sighed. Turns out I was right. She gave it back. She'd found it near the hood of the car the night they brought it in. Grabbing it was just a spur-of-the-moment thing, and since no one had come asking for it, she'd kept it. I was a bit annoyed, but mostly relieved that I got it back. But the question remained, how had that ended up at the hood of the car? "There was all kinds of gunk just kind of hanging there," she said. "Figured it was an animal." "And you're sure that's where you found it?" "Sure as sure can be, yeah." I stood there for a moment, feeling an uncomfortable thought forming in the back of my head. There was no way for that ring to go from my broken arm on the driver's side to a pile of meat stuck in the grill of the car. But the proof of it had been in front of me all along. I had worn that ring for 12 years. There was a permanent indent on my finger. Looking down at my left hand, there was no such indent. This wasn't my arm. As soon as that thought settled in my mind, I could feel the arm twist and turn. Hadn't it been for the bandages, there's no way to tell what it would have done. It squirmed and pulled against me, thrashing like a dying fish on land. The old woman just looked at me. "You all right? Want me to call someone?" she asked. I don't know," I said. "I don't know?" I had to get to the bottom of this. I hurried out of there as fast as I could. It was getting late in the afternoon when I got back home. Grabbing an old backpack and a couple of painkillers, I was about to head right back out. But a thought hit me. Maybe it wasn't as abstract as I thought. Maybe it wasn't just a feeling. Maybe something was really there. Looking down at my arm, I could feel it stirring, just within my control. Something sleeping, waiting to spring into action. With my right hand on the front door, I stopped and spoke out loud. "Whatever you want, just don't," I asked. "Don't!" There was no response, no stirring. On a spur-of-the-moment whim, I packed one more thing into my backpack, just in case. A Hail Mary. Making my way to the scene of the accident, it was impossible to tell anything had ever happened there. I could barely even make out the place where I swerved, or where my wheel got caught in the ditch. I found the general area in the field where my car had spun out of control, and from there it was easy to find the tree I'd smashed into. It was still there. I spent hours going over it all, following the path the car had taken, starting from that tree, and working my way back. There was nothing there, nothing new. It was all just gravel, weeds, and pavement. What had I expected? A signed confession? As the sun dipped behind the clouds, I could feel a cold wind coming on. I'd lost track of time. As I turned back, there was a sudden cramp in my arm. A shock of pain crept up my spine, spreading throughout my body like a spider's web. I could feel my left arm throbbing against the bandage wrap. Something was wrong. I was in the middle of the field. I could see for miles in every direction. Cars passing by in the distance. Wet grass staining my pants all the way up to my knees. In this one cold wind, cutting straight through my clothes. I shivered, but my left arm didn't. Taking a step back towards where I came from, another shot of pain struck me. This one tripped me, sending me face first into the grass. It knocked the air out of my lungs. I rolled over on my back, gasping for breath. My left hand was creeping up my stomach like a spider with a meaty tail. It stopped over my face, tapping the bridge of my nose with the index finger. I couldn't feel a thing. Moving to push it off, it instead struck back, grasping my right hand in return. "Stop!" I wheezed as I sat back up. "Just stop. Stop this." But it didn't. Ned, I just sat there, a wounded man holding his arms. I struggled back and forth for well over half an hour, getting back on my feet only to get knocked back down. By the time I'd made my way back to the road, I looked like I'd been hiking for miles. My hair was a mess and my clothes were covered in grass and mud. I had a handprint across my face like I'd smacked myself. I trusted myself with a short drive to get there, but I wasn't sure about going back. It felt reckless to get behind a wheel in my state. Still, I couldn't just walk all the way back home, and having it towed would be a pain in the ass. I got back in my car while I thought about it, wiping myself off with a towel from my backpack. It'd gotten dark outside. The overcast didn't help. I could almost taste the rain. I contemplated my options and figured that if I kept it slow and only used my right arm, I could carefully make my way home. I put the keys in and turned on the headlights. There was an elk standing in front of my car. It sniffed the hood of my car curiously, then proceeded to stare me down. I was just surprised. I got a good look at it. There was something wrong with one of its hind legs. It lacked fur, and there was a sort of spreading baldness reaching halfway up the side of the body. My arm was slowly rising on its own, as if looking over the dashboard. The elk recoiled as if in pain and set off in a troubled three-legged gallop. It disappeared into the woods. Looking down at my arm, a stray thought hit me. Was this spreading too? I painstakingly made my way back home. I dropped my backpack in the hallway, locked my front door, and collapsed into the shower. I was exhausted. I stood in the shower for about half an hour, looking down at my mother's ring. I was wearing it on my right hand now, but it just didn't feel the same. That wasn't where it was meant to be. Still, it was nice to have it back. Whenever I turned the ring a little, I could feel the engraving against my skin. It was a little gesture I did when I was anxious, as a reminder that it was still there. I got dressed and ready for a slow evening at home without any further drama. My arm wasn't acting up, but as I passed through the hallway, something didn't feel right. At first, I couldn't say what it was. Maybe the hum of an old lamp or some air duct acting up. I wasn't sure, but it was something. It had to be. I stepped up to the front door. There used to be a light coming from the hallway outside. That light was always on, and there should be a little light coming in through the peephole. But there wasn't. Had a fuse blown? I had a closer look. There was someone just outside my door. A click. My left hand had unlocked the door. The door flung open, knocking me back. A tall silhouette, close to 7 feet tall, pushed its way into my apartment. It was dressed in a sort of black poncho, covering its face with layers of bandages. A single frog-like eye stared me down as it pushed forward. I scrambled backwards on the floor. It was fast. Damn fast. It stepped forward and reached for one of my legs, but I managed to pull away in time. I got back on my feet, barely managing to pull my left arm along. It was trying to grab a hold of something, as if to slow me down. In a spur-of-the-moment decision, I grabbed a lamp from the windowsill, throwing it across the room. The intruder ducked, then came at me again. I ducked under, just in time, and headed for the door. As I reached the front door, my left arm tried to force it shut. I fought against myself to get out, but it was useless. The door was shut and locked, and my left hand refused to budge. The 7-foot-tall shape came around the corner, slowly approaching. I had to think of something. Anything. My backpack. It was right there. I had packed a couple of things earlier. A towel, some bandages, painkillers, and a water bottle. But I'd also packed some lighter fluid. Seeing as how my left arm had reacted so violently to boiling water, I had this stupid idea that the prospect of a straight-up fire would do something even worse to it. It didn't seem so stupid anymore. I grabbed the lighter fluid and sprinkled it on my left arm. The tall shape stopped, seemingly reacting to the smell of it. I wanted to say something, but all that came out were empty breaths. We were like animals, circling each other, waiting for one to make the first move. I emptied the lighter fluid, grabbing a box of matches. I held the box with my mouth and a triplicate of matches in my hand. I spilled the rest on the floor. For a moment, we just looked at one another. A single inhuman eye peeking through the bandage wraps. The vague shape of 4, maybe 5 extremities at its side. How many arms did this thing hide under the poncho? A flash of realization came to me. This is what I had almost hit with my car. And with that, I lit the matches. It leapt at me, but it was too late. The moment the open flame touched the skin on my left arm, it detached. The open nerves just let go of me, and the thing fell off my body. It squirmed on the floor like a dying animal, grasping at whatever its fingers could reach.